Jovan, Buha! Buha!
Yo, I'm Jovan Buha, Lakers beat writer for The Athletic, and welcome to another Lakers postgame reaction show. I just got back from the couch. I am here in LA. I am not at the Frost Bank Arena Center. I don't remember which one it is. Second game in a row. I don't remember the arena name there. Pretty confusing at this point. But for those who tuned in last night to my live, I said I was not going to be going to San Antonio with it being a back-to-back night before Thanksgiving. If I can be back for a holiday, I try to do it. There's some tough ones, Christmas, New Year's Eve, etc. But didn't feel like going to San Antonio. Won't be traveling to all 41 games, more likely something like 34, 35. So I was here in LA watching at home. First game of the season I've missed. First game I have watched on TV outside of a couple preseason games. Definitely an odd experience not being in the building, and you pick up. I think it's an easier watching experience. You can, I think, pick up more from watching on TV. I've talked about that in the past, but certainly different than being there and sort of absorbing the atmosphere, the crowd, being in the locker room and being around the players and the coaches and all that stuff, pregame, postgame. So definitely a different experience. But one of the positives is I get to go live a bit earlier than usual. I typically go live about 1.5 to 2 hours after the game. Tonight was able to go about 30 minutes or so. Wanted to watch JJ's postgame press conference and sort of just make sure I didn't miss anything. But we are live now, so you guys know the drill. Before we get into our 3 takeaways, for those watching on YouTube, please be sure to hit that subscribe button, turn on channel notifications, and like and comment on this video. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. So I haven't even said the score yet. The Lakers won. They snapped their 3-game skid, beating the San Antonio Spurs 119-101 to improve to 11-7, 4-5 on the road. A very much needed bounce back win for the Lakers. A solid win. I would dare say an impressive win for them, especially coming off of not only a 3-game losing streak, but I would say 3 deflating losses. To have the Orlando game wrapped up and then to lose it at the free throw line over the final minute of that game, really the final 40 seconds of that game, then to play a solid first half against Denver, then get curb stomped in the third quarter, and then to have the same thing happen against Phoenix. And I would even say that was arguably a worse second half, all things considered. But certainly the Denver one is in its own special place in hell for Lakers fans, just because of all the history with Denver. But to have those 3 losses and then really to get no break before this game, it was the second night of a back-to-back. San Antonio was also on a back-to-back, but they had played at home, so no travel for them. But LA got into San Antonio at 4 a.m. And still, despite that, I thought from wire to wire, really, like San Antonio got off to a hot start. They hit a few threes and they had a little bit of a lead there. But really from like middle of the first quarter on, LA was in control of this game. They weathered several runs from the Spurs. Didn't matter. LA still, again, firmly in control, put it away in the fourth quarter. And really like the end of the third, but then San Antonio wasn't going away. They were hanging around like 12, 10 points, and then LA stretched it back out to about 20. San Antonio cleared the bench, and then that was it. So let's get into our first takeaway from tonight's game, which is going to be Dalton Knecht return to the starting lineup. And that was the right move. And this is something that I've been talking about a lot on these post-game reactions is, with Dalton played really well once he got the shot to start. And even before he got the shot to start, while Rui was still there, like his first breakout game was that Memphis game. And Rui, that was the game Rui sprained his ankle. And then from that point on, Rui missed a few games. Dalton started, and he had the eruption against the Jazz. He had the big game against the Pelicans, and he just had this really impressive stretch there of showing why the Lakers were so high on him at number 17, why they felt he could come in and immediately contribute to this team, and really looking like the sharpshooter the Lakers have been looking for, you could say for the entire LeBron AD era, but certainly since that championship season. During that run, that they had several guys kind of shooting in that 40% range. Caruso, KCP, Kuzma, like different guys stepped up, even Rondo at times, but they haven't really had this type of dead-eye shooter in the Dalton Knecht mold. But I was trying to caution people that I felt, just reading the situation, that Rui Hachimura was going to return from injury and return to the starting lineup. That's exactly what happened. And LA had a couple of subpar games, the Denver loss and the Phoenix loss. And last night we talked about it on the stream in Phoenix. Like, I felt the right move was moving Cam Reddish actually to the bench and just leaning in to LA's offensive identity, because for as rough as Rui played for those 2 games, like first 2 games back from injury, pretty tough opponents in Denver and Phoenix. And ultimately, I just think from a talent perspective, Rui's a better player than Cam Reddish. He's clearly a better offensive player than Cam Reddish. And to me, just given how bad the defense has been, I like if Cam Reddish makes them the 26th best defense versus the 28th best defense, like that matters. But what matters more is Dalton Knecht starting and this starting lineup looking really good again. And to me, like, you could have gone in either direction with Rui versus Cam. I felt it made more sense to bench Cam. I saw Zach Lowe tweeted something similar today. And, anytime I agree with an opinion of Zach Lowe, or he agrees with the opinion of I take that as a good side. So I was like, okay, we'll see if the Lakers end up doing that. And to JJ's credit, he made the second starting lineup change of the season. He's obviously made some changes due to injury, but this was the second change by choice. First one being, of course, moving D'Angelo Russell to the bench for Cam Reddish. But now LA is starting 5 guys 6'5" and above, and they were already doing that. But I think that there's a clear offensive, like in comparison with the original starting lineup, this is more in line with that in terms of having 5 offensive-minded guys. But in Dalton, you have a better off-ball threat than D'Lo. D'Lo, I will touch on him in my second takeaway, but D'Lo clearly is still at his best with the ball in his hands. Dalton doesn't need the ball in his hands as a spot-up catch and shoot threat, but also an off-ball movement guy. Like, he's just such a dangerous and versatile weapon for LA's offense that I think, this was the way it had to go. I was surprised that it only took 2 games for him to return to the starting lineup. But again, give JJ credit. He acknowledged the problem. He acknowledged that this starting lineup with Cam and Rui was not working. And in my opinion, he made the right call. I know a lot of people wanted him to bench Rui. I think this was the right call. I think this is leaning into arguably their 5 best players or 5 best offensive options right now. And a lineup that, like, Rui played a lot better tonight. I will touch on him as well a little later. But I just thought inserting Dalton for Cam, whether it was Cam or Rui, but specifically Cam, to me, it was a talent upgrade. It was a major offensive upgrade, and it's no surprise that the starting lineup looked a lot better. Dalton had 10 points in the first quarter, ended up leading the team with 20, and he looked much more comfortable. And it was a question I talked about last night. I asked JJ after the game if Dalton had a couple of quiet games coming off of the bench. And I was like, is there just something to maybe him being a starter and just getting into a better rhythm with the starting group? And like, how can you kind of replicate that with him coming off the bench? And JJ was like, maybe there is something to him having a better rhythm and flow with the starters. So clearly that seems to be the case. And I have the numbers here. If you look at Dalton as a starter, 6 games, 19.7 points per game, 55% from the floor, 48% on threes. Dalton off the bench, 12 games, 7.8 points per game, 45.8% from the floor, 38.6% on threes. So that's a 10% swing from overall from the field, and a 10% swing on threes. And it's not factoring minutes, of course, from a minutes perspective. I don't have that in front of me, but there's going to be a big gap there. So that's certainly playing into him scoring more, but he's looked much better playing more minutes next to Austin Reeves, LeBron James, Anthony Davis, when you have to put so much attention on those guys and them running stack actions or 80 LeBron pick and roll, LeBron AD pick and roll, AR LeBron pick and roll, LeBron AR pick and roll, like all the different variations of 2 and 3 man games with those three. And then you have Dalton spotting up or relocating into space. Like, that's just so tough to guard. So I think that the Lakers are finally settling on this identity of, we're going to really lean into the offense. We're going to be a top 5 offense, if not top 3. We're going to play those 4 in particular, AR, Dalton, LeBron, and AD, as much together as we can. And we're going to just ride the offense, because the defense, like, it was better tonight. Still some issues with the transition defense, matching up with guys, some of the rotations, giving up open threes. Like, that continues to be an issue for this group. Offensive rebounds, etc. Like, if you can drag 80 out, you can still score on these guys. But overall, better effort. And JJ talked about it after the game, switching 1 through 5. That was the game plan tonight. And I think that's a San Antonio specific thing, because for as big as Wemby is, you can still put, like we saw in the first time they played the Spurs, they were able to get away with Max Christie fronting him and kind of battling him. And Dalton had some good minutes against Victor. But whether it's Dalton, Cam, Rui, even Austin, like Max, you can get away with getting into Victor's legs, and it just becomes a matter of, is he going to make, like, he's still going to get a good shot up, because he's, I mean, seeing him next to AD, he looks like he's like 7'7", but he's still going to get a good shot up. But I thought those guys were able to disrupt him a bit and really get into his legs. And that's kind of the next level for Wemby, is being able to attack that. Similar to, I would say, the way that defenses guarded KD early in his career. It was very much being physical with him, getting into his legs. And sometimes KD would actually struggle with smaller defenders just because of their ability to, like, he didn't have that strong base that would offset some of those guys. So I thought, overall, though, I'll touch on the defense in a little bit as well, but I would say, like, this was the right move, moving Dalton back into the starting lineup. I think he should remain the starter moving forward. I think if and when Vando comes back, or whenever that is, I think there should be a conversation between Rui and Vando starting, and depending on what Vando looks like. But for now, I think LA leading into the offensive identity and trying to get Dalton more reps with their best players just makes a lot of sense. And I think it brought a balance to the rotation of, now D'Lo's coming off the bench. He's more that 6-man type. And then you have, like, so he's slotted in a better position, because when Dalton was coming off the bench, D'Lo was also a bit more marginalized. Now he was moved from the 6th man to the 7th man, kind of behind Dalton, in terms, like, at least from like an offensive hierarchy perspective. And then you have Max, Cam, Gabe, though he got benched in the second half, and then the backup big kind of bringing the defense and the energy. And it's sort of getting back to the identity that JJ originally wanted, of banshees and defenders and energy guys coming off the bench. So I think it brings, like, the offense, the starting lineup clearly skews more offensive focused, and that's okay, because that is the strength of this team. They're not a good defense. Jared Vanderbilt should help that, but I think this team is going to largely have to get by just being really, really good offensively. And that, again, that's okay. You can still be a good team that way. Can you be a great team? Probably not. And that's where we get into them likely having to make a move or two at some point, get Vando back as well. But for now, I think I like the direction of the starting lineup. We'll see how they look against OKC on Friday. But I think JJ, again, like, I know fans want the immediacy of lineup changes, and I think a lot of fans wanted Dalton to stay in the starting lineup and Rui to come off the bench. That's just not how it goes. It's not how it works when an incumbent starter and a guy who has a certain status internally comes back. They're going to get that starting spot back. But to JJ's credit, he made the decision of, teams have been just ignoring Cam, and he's just been a non-factor offensively. And it's kind of been similar to Gabe. I would say he's been more impactful and better defensively, but kind of similar. Just he's out there offensively not doing much. And I think JJ realized, like, just from a talent perspective, it's better to have Dalton out there and provide that shooting, provide that weapon. And now that he's back in the starting lineup, I don't think, or at least it shouldn't change. He should remain a starter moving forward. So that was takeaway number one for me. Takeaway number two was the supporting cast stepping up. So LA had 7 guys in double figures, which I don't know this for a fact, but I would assume that is a season high, if not tying a season high. I can't remember another game where they had this many guys in double figures. But quickly, so AD has 19, 14, and 7. Remember, he had the big 40-point game against the Spurs last time they played. They were setting a lot of doubles, putting a lot of attention on him, but he made them pay with the slicing and dicing them up with those 7 assists, only 1 turnover. So I thought a really nice bounce back for AD after, like, he was good against Phoenix. I don't think he was that good defensively, and was certainly not good defensively against Denver was his worst game of the season. So after a couple of, like, I would say a bad game and then a subpar defensive game against Phoenix, it was a bounce back for AD. Rui, to me, people are going to focus on Max and on D'Lo and on Dalton starting, but I thought Rui just made some timely shots. He competed. He had 5 rebounds, which might not sound like much, but for Rui, that's a step in the right direction with some of his recent rebounding trends. And I thought he just looked much more comfortable out there. And I think part of that is a ripple effect of having Dalton out there. Of if Rui is the 5th option. Like we saw it last year, and that was part of the reason why the D'Lo starting lineup worked, was because when Rui is the 5th guy and he's getting all these open shots and often an opponent's weakest defender and less attention, I actually think that that's the best version of Rui we see offensively. But when he's the 4th guy, now all of a sudden, teams are ignoring Cam, that the paint's a little bit more loaded up. And I think there's just a little bit more attention on Rui. So I thought he was a benefit a benefactor of Dalton returning to the starting lineup. And so I thought Rui, and he was competing defensively. I thought he had some good defensive moments. As I mentioned, defending Wemby and jockeying for position. LeBron had a triple-double. I think this is his 4th or 5th of the season, 16, 10, and 11. Did have 5 turnovers, continues to make some of these are guys just not catching passes and not being ready. And that's something that his teammates have to work on. Some of it also is LeBron telegraphing and forcing passes that, he just continued to not be there. Did struggle from the floor, 8 of 18 overall. Like he had a better second half, better 3rd and 4th quarters, but really, I think he started 4 for 13, 4 for 14, something like that. AR 13, 2 and 2, a bit of a 3 turnovers, but Dalton, as I mentioned, 20 points led the team, 8 rebounds for Dalton. So that he continues to contribute in other ways, as we see. Also had a couple steals. Then to me, D'Lo, 17 points off the bench. This was his best game since early in the season. That first half, he had 14 points. I thought that was probably his best half of the season. And he led the team. I'm checking now. Yeah, he led the team in plus 19. So I thought this was, again, D'Lo's best game in weeks. And he was assertive. He was confident. He was getting downhill, 7 for 11 from the floor. So D'Lo has not been playing well recently for the past couple of weeks, but this was a nice bounce back from him. And I thought this looked more like the D'Lo from last season. Didn't have much of the second half in terms of scoring, but with LeBron and AD and Max and Dalton, those guys were kind of carrying the load. So they didn't need D'Lo, but he kept them afloat in the first half during some stretches where the offense was stalling a bit. And then Max Christie with finished with 12 points, but had 8 consecutive points late in the 3rd quarter to help stretch the lead from, it was hovering around double digits, got all the way up to, I want to say 19 at some point. But Max hit a 3, had an and 1, had a dunk. Max, I thought this was a season high for him with 12, and second time he set his season high against the Spurs. So this is an advantageous matchup for Max. But I thought from a supporting cast perspective, this was one of LA's best games of the season. It wasn't just the scoring. I thought everyone was locked in defensively. And I will say, I think this is, as I just said with Max, I think in general, this is an advantageous matchup for LA because it's one of the few teams that they have a major size advantage over. The Spurs, of course, with Wemby, and Wemby almost single-handedly sways it for measuring the average height of each Spur player or rotation player versus each Laker, but taking Wemby out, and I thought LA did a nice job containing him. Like if you're looking at Castle and Chris Paul and Julian Champagny and Harrison Barnes and Keldon Johnson and Trey Jones and Devin Vassell, like these guys are all like a couple of those guys are like 6'6", 6'7", but Harrison Barnes is like 6'8", but everyone else is like 6'6" and below. And LA, like this is just one of the few teams that LA has a major size advantage on. And when they have a size advantage, they can punish you in the paint. They outscored them 58-42 in the paint. They won the rebounding battle for the first time in a few games, 46-38. So I thought LA, like this is again a matchup where they can control the physicality and the paint battle, and like they did that. And you got to do it when you have the advantage. You got to take advantage of it. And I thought that they did that tonight. And the third thing for me was a slight rotation shift we saw in the second half, where Christian Coloco and Gabe Vincent did not play in the competitive portion of the game. And we've seen JJ do that before in terms of, they went with LeBron and Rui. I guess Rui technically at the 5, but we've seen him go away from Coloco in certain matchups where he hasn't trusted him in the second half. But this was the first time he went away from Gabe Vincent like this. Gabe only ends up playing 6 minutes, and I talked about it on last night's stream. I felt like the Lakers needed to really go back to the drawing board with a lot of the rotation, consider making a starting change, which they did, consider changing the bench rotation, which they ultimately did. They went with the 10-man rotation in the first half, but then the second half, they went with an 8-man rotation. They tightened up the bench minutes, fewer minutes for Cam Reddish. D'Lo played a little bit more. Max Christie played a little bit more, but they were kind of going with like 7 guys, really, if you look at like the starting minutes plus D'Lo and Max. And I thought that made sense. Like this is a group that is going to have to lean into the starting lineup, lean into the offensive end. And if D'Lo's having a good offensive night, he can play 24, 26, 28 minutes. If Max is contributing, he could play a little bit more. Cam, I think, is going to play in like 15 to 18 minute range just for his defense. And then I think when Jackson Hayes gets back, he'll obviously play, 12 to 16 minutes a night, depending on the matchup. But that to me should be the rotation moving forward, at least for right now. Like Gabe Vincent, looking at it, played 6 minutes and had it. Tony Snell did again, had 1 foul, was +1. Lakers were +1 in his 6 minutes, but he just continues to not be a factor at all offensively. It's insane to think that this guy 18 months ago was the starting point guard on a team that made the finals, was at times the number 3 option on that team, but we've just not seen that version of him at all this season. Like it's kind of gotten to the point where like if he hits a jump shot, it's like a big deal. So Gabe, I think the gap between Gabe and Max to me has been progressively increasing. I don't think it's really a conversation anymore. I think Max should be ahead of Gabe. I think Cam should be ahead of Gabe. I think obviously D'Lo should be ahead of Gabe. So yeah, I mean, I just think Gabe should be out of the rotation, and it seemed like JJ really went for the win tonight. It was like he's going to insert Dalton, play arguably the best 5-man lineup possible. He's going to play D'Lo a little bit more, and then play like the bench guys that are playing well. He's going to play those guys more, and the guys who aren't playing well, he's going to bench them. And like that's ideally how you do it every night. But of course, there's politics, there's trade value, there's all these factors that go into it. You're trying to keep everybody engaged, happy, involved. There's just so many moving parts and factors with all this. But tonight, I thought JJ was locked in on getting the win, shorten the rotation, and they probably can't, like, even if you look at the starters, really only AD played 35 minutes. Everyone else was 33 or below. So because this ended up being a decisive win, LA was able to rest some of these guys. You can't play the starters like 35 plus every night. That's just not sustainable. But to me, like, I think, again, going with like an 8.5 man rotation especially if Jackson's out. I just like that more, and I think that's the way forward for LA, because I don't think, like, Max had one of his best games of the season, arguably his best game. D'Lo had arguably his best game of the season. Cam was still solid defensively, didn't do anything offensively, and then you had the 5 starters, and you're not going to get. Dalton's not going to score 20 every night. Rui's not going to score 16 every night. D'Lo's not going to score 17 every night. Max isn't going to score 12 every night. So you're not always going to get that from the supporting cast, but the nights you do, you're likely going to win. And if you could get at least a couple of those guys to consistently pop each night, doesn't have to be the same 2, but if you can continue to get those guys popping, and Dalton has continually, consistently popped as a starter, that's where LA at least can compete offensively. The defensive end, I think San Antonio missed a bunch of good looks, 14 for 40 from 3. I feel like they easily could have been 20 for 40 or 22 for 40, given the caliber of shots they got. But I think LA, 15 turnovers for the Spurs. LA, I thought, had a more disruptive game defensively, and the 1 through 5 switching really worked in this matchup. I don't think you can't do that against Denver. You can't do that against Phoenix. And that's where I think you saw LA getting blown out versus those 2 teams versus them blowing San Antonio out. But yeah, I mean, I thought JJ pushed a lot of the right buttons tonight. And so to recap, my 3 takeaways from tonight's game, Dalton Knecht with the starters made sense. It was the right move. And I think this should be a starting lineup moving forward. Number 2, the supporting cast stepped up in a big way, arguably the biggest way they have this season. And number 3, JJ tightened the rotation in a manner that to me made sense, just given the personnel, given some of the guys that have been struggling, and just given this team really needed this win. If they had lost this 4 in a row, then you're going into OKC really down. And then that's I think a tougher situation to bounce back in. But now the vibes, obviously was not there tonight in the locker room, but I'm sure the vibes were much better, much more upbeat. And I think now they will have a nice Thanksgiving and then come back, probably shoot around Friday, and then go into a really big game with OKC, which will have ramifications for the NBA Cup, and if LA has any shot at going to Las Vegas, or if they will be in the consolation bracket and end up playing a couple of random games over that stretch. But with all that said, let's get into the Q&A. I see we got some super chats here. Let me take a sip of water. I don't know why it's really hot in here. Like sweating from my eyes. Okay, first one from Angelco Ezorad Rezo. Yo, the Lakers need to trade for Collins and Sexton and forget about dealing with anyone but Utah. Plinka needs to make this happen, and if Kessler can be included somehow, it would be outstanding. Let's go Lakers. Well, thank you, Ezorad, for the super chat. I would say I think Kessler, to me, is the most attractive potential Laker of these 3. So I would try to rework this to have Kessler either by himself or with one of the other 2. I like Sexton more than I like Collins. To me, Collins he's a bit of he's kind of a 5, but he's also too small to really be a 5. And so I certainly think he could help, and given comparing him, I think he's better than Rui. I think he's better than Jackson. So he would certainly help LA's front line. But if you could get Kessler by himself or Kessler plus Sexton, that's a trade that I think makes a lot of sense. So I'm like, we've mentioned it before, but Utah, Toronto, Brooklyn, Chicago, although Chicago and LA have a weird relationship. I'm trying to think that there's been a couple of other teams we've talked about. Washington is another one, and maybe Charlotte. But I think those are the 4 or 5 teams that are I think that the most likely. Probably you could throw Portland in there. Yeah, I guess those are the 5 or 6 teams I think are the most likely trade partners for the Lakers this season. Super chat from Matthew. Thank you, Matthew. I think Dalton has made his case as a starter. It doesn't matter if they bleed points when they can score at will. He opens up so much for them. I'm exactly there. I think Dalton should be the starter moving forward. I think they should be leaning into the core four of Austin, Dalton, LeBron, and AD. And like you just need shooting around LeBron and AD. They've never had a shooter quite like this in terms of Dalton and his skill set. And I just think it opens up so much where if you pack the paint, he's going to be open. And then if you are sticking to him, then you're dragging a defender out of the fray. And if it's 4-on-4, I like the Lakers odds, especially with LeBron and AD on the floor, to get to the rim, to generate good looks for Austin, Rui, or for themselves. So I'm with you. I think he should be the starter moving forward. And I think any dreams of the top 15 defense are dead for now. This is going to be a bad defense, but if it could be a top 3 offense, which I think it has the potential to be, that offsets that. I see a super chat from Tenora Mente. I think you had a question. I saw you in the pre-chat, but thank you for the super chat. I don't see your question here, so if you drop it in the chat, I will make sure to respond to that. But I appreciate the super chat. BLC, thank you for the super chat. DK benefits from space created by LB/AD. D'Lo and Max, 3 thumbs up. Yeah, I think it goes both ways. I think Dalton benefits from LeBron and AD and their rim pressure and paint pressure and all the attention that they draw from a defense. But I also think it benefits them from if once Dalton hits a couple shots, you see defenses start shifting over to him and just being like, whoever's Dalton's defender, you are in that guy's jersey, you are trailing him around screens, you are not letting that guy get open. And sometimes that can lead to over-aggression, and that's where Dalton could get a back cut or something like that. But also, again, if it just takes out another defender from helping and being around the paint, which tends to be the case. Like, if it's Cam there, that guy is parked in the paint ready to help. He's just ignoring Cam. And Cam, given sort of the constraints of the way he's used within LA's offense, but also just the limitations of his game, like Cam is not going to make you pay. Unless like he'll have the couple of games where he hits like 2 threes, but even then, the difference between Dalton being out there and Cam being out there is vast. So yeah, I think it goes both ways, and then again, Dalton and Max arguably their 2 best games of the season. Super chat from George Santiago. Happy first Merry Thanksgiving to you and Helena. Thank you. We both say thank you, and thank you all. I was going to do a little Thanksgiving message at the end of the stream, but I just want to quickly say to all of you, thank you so much. This is my first Thanksgiving with a YouTube channel, with a podcast, or at least my own podcast, and this has been awesome. I cannot thank you all enough for the support, for watching, for listening, for subscribing, for commenting, for liking, for sharing, all that stuff. So I cannot do any of this without you, and all of the comments, questions, super chats, all that stuff really helps. It really keeps me going, and I'm excited. Like at this point, a lot of these names I've answered, double-digit questions from you. It's been awesome to continue to see the same names and faces and really interact with all of you. And this is only the beginning. We're not even a year in. We're about like 9 months in, and I'm excited for the next 3 months to hit the 1 year mark and then just continue from there. So thank you all. Super chat from Braden. Hey, Jovan Brate, much better game. Connect 4 is him. Yes. Thank you for using Brate. I don't know if you're Serbian or not, but Connect is him. And again, he should stay in the starting lineup. Is this Haley Ford? Hallie Ford? Haley Ford. Thank you for the super chat. I think Schroeder would also be a good pickup if Lakers can trade for him. Yeah, I like Schroeder. I think he's better than Gabe, or at least this version of Gabe. And especially I like him if you are getting Cam Johnson or Dorian Finney-Smith. I wouldn't say I like him enough to like, I mean, I don't like saying things in a vacuum. So of course, like there's other wing options that the Lakers could get that maybe satisfy the wing need. But if you are already trying to get Cam Johnson or Dorian Finney-Smith, I don't mind Dennis as a throw-in and as ultimately a backup, because I think a lot if the Lakers are trading D'Lo and Gabe, and I think a lot of potential trades are probably going to include one, if not both of those guys. You do need a backup ball handler, and Dennis, I think he's flawed. I think he's a little bit overrated defensively, and the jump shot has obviously been inconsistent for much of his career, including his career with the Lakers. But he does have a level of familiarity and camaraderie and history with LeBron and AD. I think that matters. He's played in big games and had big games and big moments with those guys. It was obviously part of the Western Conference Finals run. So I think, especially with what they're getting or not getting from Gabe, I think he's an upgrade on Gabe, and he's not that expensive. So, or I guess they kind of X each other out if Gabe is included in that. Question from Norma, aka my mom. Glad Lakers had a comeback, missed the game. Your dad was watching OKC. LOL. Happy Thanksgiving to all the viewers. Please hit the like button. Thanks. Who is OKC playing tonight? They're playing Golden State. They are up by 2. But thank you for the super chat, Mom, and happy Thanksgiving again to everybody. And please be sure to hit that like button. And then super chat from Eeg. I don't even know how to pronounce this. Jovan, greatly appreciated your Clipper story where you reported the hashtag facts and it ruffled some feathers and obviously ended up being spot on. Good for you. Need more of that honest stuff throughout the media. Thank you. I mean, I've talked about this before. Like, it was the first big story I ever reported. First story I reported where it was on like First Take and you know all the big national shows. Made for a very awkward couple months in the locker room. Like that's one of the tricky things with being a beat reporter is anytime you write something negative. I mean, even some of the stuff I say on here, I'm sure has affected me at times with certain people, but I just try to, I mean, with reporting, of course, like anything I'm reporting, I'm getting from at least 2 sources minimum, but with whether it's reporting or my analysis, I really try to come at it from as honest of a place as possible. And there are always some restrictions to the honesty, right? Like even in that story, there were certain things that I couldn't get a second source on, or I just felt like it wasn't right to include for whatever reason. And there's certainly some even juicier stuff that I think would have made the story even bigger that I just had to cut. So that's kind of how it goes sometimes. But I mean, I that was a fun story to work on. I did a couple versions of it. Also, you know, so some of this investigative stuff where I dive into chemistry and some of the inner workings of stuff, like those are really fun stories to work on. It is nerve-wracking, and I can be nervous and anxious about what it's going to come out, what the reactions are going to be. But that one in particular, I think it aged very well. I think, I mean, they collapsed 3-1 in the bubble. Multiple guys talked about it afterward, about how bad the chemistry was. And even since then, Lou Will, Pat Bev, whoever, anytime they do interviews talking about that group, they talk about how disjointed it was. So I do think it aged pretty well. All right, let's get back to the chat. So I see Dark Galaxy's talking about Day'Ron Sharpe, that he's only 6'9". I don't think the Lakers, I think he has the potential to be solid as a backup center. And especially if you can keep Jackson, I kind of, unless they get a clear cut, no brainer backup 5, I don't mind the potential of having like a Sharpe and a Hayes or a Sharpe and a Wood. I think you can have 2 backup 5s like that's allowed. And for the Lakers, honestly, it's probably something they need, because if AD ever goes down, you don't want just like one guy. Like we've kind of seen it now where it's like, you know, Jackson goes down, Christian's already out, and now it's AD and Koloko. And Koloko, I thought Koloko actually had a good shift in the first half. I was surprised he didn't get a second shift, but and I think it was more of an offensive thing where JJ wanted to spread them out and attack them, going 5 out. But I thought Koloko's had some flashes over the last couple of weeks, but still, I would say if I'm okay with 2 bigs. I just think you need a different look, and I do think Sharpe would provide a different look. KV, is it true that players fight a lot physically behind the scenes? I don't think it's as prevalent as it used to be, but I do think players get into like verbal disagreement, like heated verbal disagreements a lot more, and like can even sometimes have internal beef, and you would never know it, or it is something that's escalating, and then ultimately it goes away. But I think the internal communication can be a bit rougher than like, there's the cliche of like locker room talk. And I think that has a certain connotation in terms of, talking about certain things that guys talk about. But I also think there's an element of that's like the confrontation and aggression in terms of how guys communicate with one another, the brutal honesty that certain guys have. So I would say, I think it's more verbal than physical, but there's certainly elements of it's not always peaceful kumbaya, and like I think it can be more aggressive than people would think. Throwing a lies, always one of my favorites. Boy, oh boy, your D-Lo points looking worse and worse. Happy Thanksgiving, and for the 100th time, plus minus don't lie. I mean, I gave D-Lo his flowers, and I mentioned his plus minus. I feel like you weren't as loud during the 4 straight games with single digit scoring, but yeah, if you want to go off on D-Lo, go off on D-Lo. Shooter Guy 7, do you think it might be worth blowing up this team if they do not make a deep playoff run? Maybe it's just me, but I'm not sure if there's a path to another championship given the assets they have. Well, I mean, that might be decided for them with LeBron James. Like, that's kind of like this is probably a 2-year window, including this year. Shams, when he was at The Athletic, we co-reported that Darvin Ham story at the end of the season, where we reported that the expectation was for LeBron to play about 2 more years. And he has since, now that he's at ESPN, talked about it a couple times, saying that that continues to be what he's heard. So I think right now the expectation would tentatively be LeBron playing this year and next year and retire. Like, it is poetic for him to retire year 23, number 23. No player has ever played 23 seasons, so he would break that record, go out. I still think, based on his play right now, still go out at a very high level. He's talked about not wanting to be, overstay his welcome in terms of becoming like a role player or a super diminished version of himself. So I could see LeBron playing 1 more year after this year. So whether the Lakers want to blow it up or not, like it might just get blown up within the next year and a half. Like that's why I think they just got to go for it, right? And you only have so many shots to try and win a championship. And again, unless, I said this before, unless they have a star that they know is coming, and maybe they do, right? It's always possible that there's always the back conversations that happen that are not quite legal, but we're not saying anyone's done anything. I'm just saying if that's the case, then 2 years from now they get star X and we're having a different conversation. But as of right now, it's looking as if LeBron's likely going to retire. This team is going to have AD plus a bunch of role players, and maybe Dalton pops and becomes an all-star or something. But outside of that, like I think that they have some solid young role player talent, but clearly not in a position to like compete post LeBron. So at that point, you have to have you have to make a decision of like, do we trade AD somewhere? Like, where is AD in a year and a half in terms of like, how has he aged? Has he suffered an injury? Like, has he hit the age cliff? And I think barring a serious injury, AD will be fine, and he'll be like 33, 34, depending on the point that we're talking. So like, but yeah, I mean, that's why I think the Lakers need to go for it, because they only have really probably like 18 months with this group or with LeBron and AD. And that to me is why you should go all in. Okay, another super chat from Eeg. I got to probably butchering this. Braun, thank you for the super chat. Braun as a super Dre / Paris 24 role, I think at 40 is the most effective. 80 plus another strong scoring punch. Love the idea of Zach LaVine to fill that 23 to 24 point per game and keep LeBron at 21-ish. Shooting plus off ball equals A plus ZL. So I'm assuming you're talking about Zach LaVine. The one tricky thing with Zach, which I continue to say, because I know a lot of Laker fans are on the Zach LaVine trade, is he just makes so much money that you basically have to give up some combination of D'Lo, Rui, Gabe, D'Lo, Rui, Vando, D'Lo, Rui, Max, and JHS. And I know some of those guys, I'm sure, especially Gabe and JHS, that some fans are fine with just giving up. But you are still giving up at least a minimum. Like if it's D'Lo, Rui, and Vando, you're like on paper you're giving up 3 of your top 7 guys, and 2 of those guys are 6'8", 6'9" for a group that's already a bit undersized. And I just think that's a lot to give up. Like is Rui and D'Lo worth Zach LaVine? Like, I guess, sure. But once you're throwing in, and who knows, maybe there was talk about maybe Chicago giving up a pick, and like that would obviously change my opinion on that. But I just think it's a lot. The Lakers are already struggling to have like 7 reliable nightly rotation players. If you're taking out at least 2 of those 7, if not potentially 3 of those 7 once Vando's back, and then you're getting a guy who's worse defensively or just as bad as like D'Lo or Rui is defensively, if not worse. I would say worse than Rui, not necessarily worse than D'Lo. That's just, I think people like I see the offense with LaVine, and look, the Lakers are leading into the offensive end, so maybe I don't like the idea of like, let's say Dalton, Zach, and Austin together. I think that's too small, too bad defensively. You do get some more athleticism with LaVine, but I think like that would probably be your closing lineup, right? Like Austin, LaVine, and Dalton with AD and LeBron. And I just don't think that's enough defense or athleticism. Like I think you could get away with 2, and maybe we're talking about moving Austin or Dalton out of that closing lineup, but you better have a pretty good 5th guy there to warrant that. And right now, I don't think that's like a Max Christie, or even if they keep Vando. Like I don't think they have that guy. So maybe they do a separate trade, but I'm personally not as high on Zach as I think a lot of people are. Okay. Android Andres, would you make a trade for Swipa? So we're talking De'Aaron Fox, because I feel like there's a couple of people, but I mean, yeah, if they could get De'Aaron Fox, I would give up De'Aaron Fox. Justine Severo, thanks Lakers for the birthday win. Happy birthday, Justine. Happy birthday. I talked about recognizing names. You're one of the names I recognize consistently on here, and let us know in the chat how old you are, but happy birthday. Fries on the grass. Do you think Austin is still on this team in 3 years? I would say it's close to 50-50. I would lean probably 55% not, because he can opt out after next season. And I think he's going to have a competitive market. And depending on, we're talking about the Lakers potentially going in a different direction, or having some difficult decisions to make if LeBron retires. So if LeBron retires, all of a sudden you have to decide what you want to do with AD, how you're going to find that next star to play with him. And I could see Austin potentially getting a bigger offer to go somewhere else. And I could see him getting like a 375, something like that deal to go be like the number 3 somewhere else. So I could see him potentially leaving. But I would say it's close. Like the Lakers are obviously high on him. They've refused to trade him basically, and I think they're going to want to keep him. He's a fan favorite. So I would say it's close to 50-50, but given the uncertainty of where the Lakers could be in the summer of 2026, I will leave open the possibility that Dalton. I mean, I keep keep mixing up Austin and Dalton. That Austin is potentially getting a bigger contract elsewhere. Super chat from Harry Chinani. Give Quincy a shot over Gabe. 50 wins possible. I'll answer the second question first. 50 wins is possible. I think it's possible. A lot has to go right though, and I think I want to see them still play better against, like, the one thing I'll say with San Antonio is I think they've been punching a little bit above their weight in terms of record. I don't think they are. I think they're closer to a 500 team than, like, I think they entered tonight like 10-8. So I think they're closer to like a 41 win team than like a 46 win team. I know it's only a few game difference, but I see San Antonio more as like a 9 or 10 seed in the play-in mix rather than where they've been. So I want to see it against OKC. I want to see it against Minnesota. I want to see it against Miami. Let's see how the next like week and a half goes and just how this team continues to grow. But certainly 50 wins is possible. Now, Quincy, we've talked about it on here so many times. Like, I would have given him a shot over Gabe, or at least given him a shot with the rotation in the preseason. I would have already given him a shot over Gabe. Gabe has earned the trust of JJ and the coaching staff. Seems to be waning a bit, and his role is being reduced, and he's been phased out of the rotation a little bit. So maybe we get to that point, but I think if it was going to happen, it probably would have already happened. Not saying it can't happen, but I think it would more likely have to be an injury situation where like D'Lo gets injured or traded or something. Then they bring in Quincy. And maybe we're talking about earlier, or I was talking about Dennis and LA needing a backup. Like maybe trading D'Lo and Gabe opens up that backup spot for Quincy. I think a lot of fans would like to see that. But for now, I think Gabe is probably, I mean, he is ahead of Quincy, but I don't think that's going to change. Ryan Rich, you think Max takes all of Gabe's minutes now? I don't think so. I think he's going to probably go back to the 10-man rotation, but it'll be a quicker leash with Gabe, in my opinion. Throne of Lies. What do you think about JJ's coaching style from the inside? How is he different from Darvin? So what I've heard, I've heard he's been a lot more transparent, and I think the planning, like he's been very clear about roles, rotations. Guys know if they're starting, coming off the bench, what the coaching staff is looking for from them that given night. From a personality perspective, again, he's much more of a type A, like very just organized and prepared and on top of things. And I that's not to say Darvin wasn't, but it's more to say like Darvin, I think, by nature was a little bit more relaxed and had a bit of a chiller vibe. JJ's very anal and rigid about stuff. So I think from that perspective, and I think you've seen it with the offensive structure, like he's been more hands-on with play calls and making sure they're organized offensively. The defense has been a work in progress, to say the least. And Darvin, had the Bud scheme, and it was a more conservative drop coverage scheme. And I like that JJ's been a little bit more creative on the defensive end, but they don't really have the personnel to do a bunch of switching. So that's something that I think they could work through. But a lot of, like, I've really heard only positive stuff. I do wonder if like him getting so upset after every loss, if that's sustainable throughout the course of a year and something that he maybe has to tone down. But I think it's almost the exact opposite of how the previous coach was. And again, I've said it before, I don't like comparing them. It's just, it's when that's been the thing, like when it's the same group, it's kind of easier to do it because you have a comparison there. But just in terms of JJ, it's really been nothing but positive. We're still not even at the 20 game mark. So I'm sure at some point stuff will pop up that players aren't happy about, but so far it's been largely positive. CJB, is LeBron hurt? He can't get downhill at all. I don't think he is. I think it's been a combination of fatigue, and he obviously he had the sickness for a bit there. I mean, he could be hurt, and we just don't know about it. He's battled foot and ankle stuff in recent years, but I have noticed that the burst has been, I wouldn't say I don't think it's gone, but it has been a bit more inconsistent. Texas Trill 12, can DFS shoot? Depends on the year. Depends on the year. Bino, Jovan, what is the most you would give up for DFS? I guess Rui in a first. And I'm not even sold on, like, I think I'm higher on Rui than a lot of the fan bases. I know he's inconsistent, but I think a lot of players making under $20 million are inconsistent. And I think like nights like tonight are a reminder of the ceiling with Rui. Now, I would like to see him be more consistent defensively, and I think he needs a higher defensive floor and just a higher floor in general. But I think ideally, like I'd probably rather send out Vando in a first if I'm the Lakers, especially because there's just a lack of certainty right now with Vando, and even if he does come back at some point soon, you don't know how, like, having double foot surgery not right before the season. It was early. I think it was back in May, but still, like, he's clearly had some injury issues over the last few years, and really since high school, and just that lack of uncertainty for me. Like, Rui has been more durable, and I would rather keep Rui and bring in DFS, and then kind of have that optionality of like you could start DFS, move Rui to the bench, and that would make sense. So I would say I would not give up more than a first for DFS. For Cam Johnson, I would consider a first and a second, maybe 2 seconds, and first and 2 seconds, and that would, a first and a second is probably, to me, like, fair for Cam Johnson. Let's see. Okay, another super chat from Eeg is really dominating the super chats. Thank you. Us fans obsess over trades because we know this isn't enough. Rui came out of left field that year. Do you anticipate another really surprising random ad? Thank you again, Jovan. You're a legend. Last one from me, LOL. Well, I appreciate you. So if you're saying, like, I mean, certainly there's always a possibility of the Lakers making a trade or someone popping. I would say if it's someone popping, I would say it's Quincy Oliveri later in the season, or even Koloko developing more later in the season. Looks like Max Christie, the way he's played the last like 2.5 weeks, I think he's starting to look more like the player a lot of people thought he could look like. So that's another guy I would throw in that mix. Of course, like, I guess Dalton, but Dalton's already popped in my opinion. And then I'm with you though. Like, I think that they got to make a move or two. So in terms of like free agency, I don't see them making a move unless they first have to make a trade to clear a roster spot before adding anybody. But that's certainly possible, but I would say unlikely, at least for right now. Super chat from BLC. LAL just need to compete on D. Everything will be okay. Yeah, the problem is, so I agree. I would still say, like, them competing with the current personnel is probably the 20 to 22nd best defense. And that's better than being the 27th or 28th or whatever. So certainly, like, I'm with you. I do think there's limitation, and it's on the organization and the front office to raise the defensive floor and really the defensive ceiling as well. So if they can do that, I think this team has enough offensive firepower to be top 5. And if they could be top 5 offense, 13 to 17 defensively, that's a really good team that at least has a shot. Another one from Dylan Spreen. Jovan. I go to school at UTK and loved having Dalton at Tennessee last year. Lakers are my favorite team, and seeing them draft DK and him thriving with the team is really a dream come true to me as a sports fan. Well, that is awesome. And Dalton's story is him being a 5-year college player, starting at a JUCO, and progressively playing his way up, into D1 and then into a bigger school at Tennessee and really popping as arguably the best college player in the country last year, or at least in that conversation. Like, it's been a crazy story. So I can only imagine being both a Tennessee fan and a Lakers fan, having him end up there. You were one of the few that got to see it last year, that you're seeing it again this year. So that's an awesome tidbit. Thank you for sharing. Dark Galaxy, I'm going to go about 10 more minutes here. We'll go to the 110 mark. Dark Galaxy, Jovan, are you still in the mindset that DFS is the perfect fit at the 3? Perfect is obviously subjective. I would say he's close to perfect. I think my one concern with him is the shooting. And this year, I'll pull it up. Let's see what he's shooting. Because the shooting has really fluctuated year over year. He's also been playing a bit more big man in terms of like defending power forwards and centers, although that could be a positive. So averaging 10.8 points per game, 4.5 rebounds, shooting 41% on 5.6 3-point attempts per game. So that's a career high in attempts and percentage. Let's go to from 2019-20 on. He's been 38%, 39%, 40%, 34%, 35%, 41%. So last 2 years, he's been a little bit down, 34 and 35. But the 3 years before that, 38, 39, basically 38, 40, 40. So if you're looking at that 6-year sample, he's been basically 38 or better in 4 of 6 years, a couple of down years at like 34, 35. So yeah, I mean, part of that was him going to Brooklyn, where it was a much worse situation from a shooting perspective. Like even in 22, 23, he shot better in Dallas than he did in Brooklyn. So I would say, yeah, I mean, he's close. He is getting up there in age. I didn't realize he's 31, about to be 32 in May. Now, doesn't really matter, but I really like DFS. I would say Jeremy Grant is another guy. Like, if he is willing to buy into his role and lean into the defensive end, I think he could basically be a better version of Rui and be one of those guys that can get you a bucket in second unit lineups if you need it. He's got the size, the athleticism, the length. I'd like to see better rebounding from him and better defense. And those are two swing factors that would determine or would swing how I feel about Jeremy Grant. But from like a realistic role player perspective, I do think DFS is about as good as it gets. Braden said, all my friends are Serbian, so they taught me a bit. Ha ha ha. That's in relation to him saying brate earlier. Okay. I see I'm pretty far back in the chat, so now I'm caught up. L.A. Jovan, do you think DJT and Herb Jones for Austin and 2 firsts is a possibility? Is that supposed to be DeJounte Murray, I'm assuming, and Herb Jones for Austin and 2 firsts? I don't think New Orleans is tearing it down yet, but that, I think that package would get their attention. That would be an interesting package. So, yeah. Okay. Slime 4L. Jovan, do you think the Lakers will make a trade before Christmas? I will say no, but I would put it probably like 75% chance they don't, 25% chance they do. So certainly there's a chance they do, but typically most teams don't start trading until January. Lakers in 7. Jovan, amazing game by Max Christie tonight. Maybe this is the game that turns around his season. Maybe more trust in him and himself by everyone. I would say Max has already turned his season around. Like he's been a little bit up and down, but for the most part, since that San Antonio, New Orleans trip, a week and a half or whatever it was ago, I think he's been playing much better. So I would say like Max is back in the rotation. He's ahead of Gabe. I think he's already turned his season around. Now he has not gotten to the level that I think everyone wanted him to get to, but it's a 4-year deal. He's 21. Again, I said from the beginning, like, let's give Max some patience. This guy is playing his first real rotation role of his career, and I think he's starting to look again much better than he did earlier, but also like starting to look more like the guy he was supposed to. L.A. Yo Jovan, who do you think will be surprise sellers in December? Kings, Wolves, Sixers, Pelicans. I don't think Kings, Wolves, or Sixers will give up on the season this early. Pelicans are more likely. I would say the Pelicans are the most likely of those four. Teams usually don't sell this early in the season. I think it would have to be, again, January, closer to the trade deadline. Looking at it, I could see. I mean, otherwise everyone else is like Detroit, Charlotte, Toronto, Washington. The Bulls or the Hawks, I guess, could be surprise sellers depending on how you view that. If they sold, if that would be a surprise or not. But they're also right there. The mix is like the 9 and 10 seeds. So in the East, you basically have to have a pulse and you have a shot to make the play in. Question from Michael D. What's your ideal starting lineup besides Braun, AD, excluding other superstars? Or beside Braun and AD? I've said I think like a realistic would be Austin, Dalton, and a 3-and-D wing in that 5th spot. So upgrading the Rui spot. I think you could also make a case like 2 3-and-D wings next to Austin, LeBron, and AD. And then Dalton's like the 6th man, but it also depends on how consistent. Because what I will say is one thing I'm interested in with Dalton is a lot of the success came partly with like there's a lot of circumstances that went in his favor. Of one, they were playing not as good teams defensively. 2, Rui got injured, so not only did he start, but he was playing mid to high 30s in minutes because LA was down whether he's a starter or a bench player, still a key guy in the rotation. And then now he just had a couple of subpar games coming off the bench, but against Denver and Phoenix. So I also want to see how Dalton looks. He's not had one of these good games against a good team yet. And part of that's been schedule driven because the Lakers have not been playing many good teams. And then the 2 times they did, he was coming off the bench. But I would like to see Dalton as a starter playing 30-plus minutes against a good team and what that looks like. So OKC Friday looks like the first time we'll get that. But if Dalton can continue this against the good teams, he should remain a starter no matter what, in my opinion. But if we're talking just like from an ideal perspective, I do think it's probably 2 3-and-D wings next to Austin, LeBron, and AD. I don't know how realistic that is. So I think for now it's probably Austin, Dalton, and a 3-and-D wing. And then LeBron and AD, but like a big 3-and-D wing. That's where Dorian Finney-Smith playing a lot of power forward center defensively, I like because it could take that load off of LeBron and AD. Then he's a 40% 3-point shooter. So that's where you kind of get the best of both worlds. I do not know where Bryce James is going. Dark Galaxy Jovan, if AR wanted to be a Laker for life, do you think the front office would want it that way too? Yes, but the front office, I mean, who knows how long this front office structure is going to remain? I think that's a question to ponder long term, and also money talks. And LA was at a certain advantage because Austin was a homegrown talent and had the arenas provision restriction where if no one offered him a big contract in restricted free agency, they could re-sign him at the deal that they did. But 2026, I think Austin's going to be unrestricted and he's going to have a market, And as long as he continues to play the way he's been playing and have another year like that next year, he's going to be making easily 20 plus, if not 25 plus million. BLC, Jovan, thank you for being an accommodating host on your pod. Always happy to watch your pods and talk Lakers. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your folks. Hoping the Lakers can continue this momentum versus OKC. Thank you, BLC. Happy Thanksgiving to you and your family as well. I appreciate the kind words. And yeah, another one from EJ. Lakers tax is real. GMs don't like Rob Lopelinka either. Hate to type this. Means zero harm. RIP to a GOAT. But if Kobe's alive, does Rob have a job? So I think there's a little bit. I don't know the answer to that question. So I don't have a great answer for you. What I will say to the first part is Lakers tax is real. I think there is a Lakers tax. I don't think it's as harmful as maybe fans think, but I think that the problem is there's a Lakers tax, and I also think there is a desperation tax. And the Lakers have been in desperation mode really even before the Russell Westbrook trade, because they were trying to maximize the LeBron AD window. Then they made the Westbrook trade. Then it was clear they had to make a trade to get out of the Westbrook business. And it was going to take a lot of assets, and they were doing that dance of like, how long do we wait? And okay, we're going to blame Frank Vogel, and now we're going to see if Darvin Ham can maximize it. But oh wait, no, Russell Westbrook still is not a good fit, and we have to move him to the bench and all this stuff. So that was its own desperation thing, and they made the most of it. Like Rob, I've said it before, but deserves credit for the 2023 trade deadline. But since then, there's been a new wave of desperation of like, okay, well, this team is good. They've looked good with Rui or Vando in there, but the depth has been a bit of an issue, and they're not quite like clear-cut contender good. And there's been a new wave of desperation of like, LA only has so many more years left of LeBron and AD together, probably 2, including this one. So if you want our Jeremy Grant, our DeJounte Murray, whoever, our Walker Kessler, give us both picks and give us Austin Reeves and give us X and give us Y. And like teams are asking for the most. And as part of that, a Lakers tax, I do think so. Like no one wants to be the Memphis Grizzlies giving the Lakers Pau Gasol that helps them win a championship for, the jealousy or whatever it is. A lot of factors. People just don't like the Lakers, don't want them to be successful, but I don't know why the camera just went out. There's also an element of just, I think, a desperation of like the situation the Lakers are in. It's clear they're not good enough and they need to get better. So that leads to a demand for more in any trade negotiations. Rob Hader, Jovan, what's the best side dish for Thanksgiving? This is a good one. I'm a mac and cheese guy, but like it's got to be the right mac and cheese. But I'll say mac and cheese. L.A. Jovan, do you have an opinion on who has more upside between Bronny and Bryce? I kind of think Bryce. At least from a physical perspective, because he's taller, and I think I think so. Brad D, are you going to travel to Golden State for Christmas, or are you staying home with family? So I am going to fly up the morning of and fly back the night of. Christmas is actually my wife's birthday, so tough birthday for her, but I'm going to see her in the morning, see her at night, and yeah, that's a tough one, especially for an NBA reporter who basically works every Christmas. Another super chat from Diego Cardona. Hey, Jovan, hope you have a great Thanksgiving tomorrow. You too, Diego. Who is your favorite Lakers role player of all time? I would say if you count Lamar Odom as a role player, I would say it's Lamar. I would throw... Like Lamar was kind of in in between zone between like a star and a role player. I would say that the first three that come to mind from the first round of championships with Kobe was Derek Fisher, Rick Fox, Robert Horry. Those three guys will always have a special place in my Laker, fandom, upbringing, memories. And then I would say with the second run, again, Odom, Bynum, 17 is my birthday, one of my favorite numbers. Vujicic, like that whole bench mob, Trevor Ariza. I know he was a starter, but like that kind of era. So I would say probably between, if I really had to pick, I would probably go with Lamar. But again, Bynum was an all-star for 1 year post-championship, so I don't know where Bynum falls in that, but it's probably between Bynum and Lamar. James, Jovan, go-to band group you listen to on a plane. Well, I've said it before, I'm a huge Drake fan, so always Drake, but I kind of don't listen to music. I'm constantly just listening to podcasts. I listen to like 4 to 6 podcasts a day, partly studying it, partly enjoying it. But there we go. Kevin Cambridge just got out of the movies. Late Night Gang still here with the salute emoji. W Jovan. Jay, you've had some funny comments in here. Jay said Jovan, best bet on a plane is to raw dog it. Really, the two worst places and times to raw dog it are the plane and the gym. It really sucks to not have headphones at the gym. Like it'll ruin a workout for me, and I can't raw dog the plane. I'm sorry. What I actually sometimes do too is like I'm. My best skill in life might be my ability to sleep on a plane. I'm a horrible sleeper in general, but for whatever reason, I get on a plane, I can knock out in 5 seconds. So I typically will put on some like lo-fi beats in the background to kind of just go with me sleeping. But okay. James says, listen to some Joey Diaz. I will check him out. Tori Black says, please stop saying raw dog. I'm sorry. But Diego said, shout out my boy Jody Beeks. Okay. Shout out to Jody. I mean, Sasha too, like he's Slovenian, not the same thing as Serbian, but I seeing ASD123. How about Jordan Farmer? Jordan Farmer, yes, he also grew up relatively close to me. So definitely was actually, this is a whole other story, but I went to USC, so obviously a USC fan, but I grew up a UCLA fan. So I was a big Farmar, Aaron Aflalo, like that group of Josh Shipp, like that Kevin Love, of course, Russ, like that era of UCLA, I was a big fan of the multiple Final Fours, but ended up going to the rival and then had to switch sides. Just incredible. Did the definition of raw dog change? It's basically when you just go on the plane with no, there's multiple definitions, but one of them is like going onto the plane or whatever and not having your phone or headphones or just sitting there staring at the screen. Brad D, greatest show of all time, The Wire, but I would throw in Breaking Bad as a close second. And no username 12 said longest 10 minutes, and then you should have said 10 minutes regulation. Yeah, well, 10 minutes in my time is like another hour. So I mean, unless you want me to stop right now, but I am gonna stop in like 2 minutes. Throne of Lies, what happened to your intro music? So I have intro music on the audio version, and when I do Buha's block episodes, when I do the lives, I don't have intro music. Maybe I can figure out how to do that, but yeah. All right, Bino, what it? I mean, my understanding with that with the RD was just like you go on a plane and you don't have headphones, so you can't listen to anything, and you're just kind of sitting in silence. But I don't. Fake Charlie, what is that? Ex Buha's block. I'm not sure. Potentially Friday. There might not be one technically this week. It's been a wild week with the back-to-back, the travel, Thanksgiving. So maybe I'm in between either. I might do a short live on Friday before the Lakers Thunder, or do an episode of Buha's block. I'm in between those two. Jay, it means staring at the back of the seat in front of you the entire time, listening to nothing and watching no videos. It's very manly. That is it. No username 12. You're my favorite Lakers coverage. Thank you. Jeremy Jaswinski, Jovan, you got to rename your show. Only 10 more minutes with Jovan. And then each episode's progressively longer. Super chat from Norma. What mac and cheese? Asking for a friend. Divots. Well, Divots, of course, Serbian, but I mean, I would say I like mac and cheese with the crispy layer on top, and then you like the extra crust of crispy cheese on top. Okay. James, we are Buha's boys. Buha's boys, Buha's block. Yes. Fang Charlie, what flight company would be your fave to fly with? I always fly Delta. Jay, 10 minutes with Jovan would actually be amazing. So, yeah. Just Incredible, Turkey's overrated. I actually agree with you. RG1, have you done any interviews with DK? No, I might be having an interview with him soon for The Athletic, but I'm also going to try and get him on the pod. Jeremy Jaswinski, Jovan, have you ever rocked a different hairstyle? In high school, I had a shaved head. It actually took me a while to figure out my hair, or like a hairstyle I liked and was confident with. I would say it was like post college. I had like variations of this, but never had a consistent barber, and yeah. So I think it took me a little bit. Rob Earth, Jovan, what is the status of Hayes and Vando? I believe Hayes is day to day, and then Vando is, I don't know. Yeah. Kevin Cambridge, what's the most recent movie you've seen? I just saw Red One with my son and my wife. So Red One, I would say it was better than I expected, but more of a kid's movie, unless you really love The Rock. Jay says, wait until you need a hair transplant. Jovan, gonna change your mind, bro. A lot of the men in my family still have hair, so I'm hoping to keep my hair long term. But if I get to that point, I think I'm just gonna shave it off and go bald. James says he's flying Delta to Japan. Let me know how that is, because I do want to go. To like Tokyo is like my number one destination right now that I haven't been to. Dark Galaxy, do you see Gladiator 2? Not yet. It is on my to-do list. Brad D, can you dunk? Not anymore. I can barely. Well, I tore my Achilles last year, so I've played basketball once in the past year, and we'll see if I can get the vert back. But I just want to get my calf back to normal size. Said 4387, are you still friends with Clippers beat writers? So there was only one when I was a Clippers beat writer. It was just Andrew Greif of the LA Times. And I guess Young Masuk. So I've known for like almost 15 years. And he's always been like one of my mentors, one of the people that's always been good to me. Andrew and I are still solid. So, Andrew's, we had a like that was the first person I shared a beat with. So we'll always have like that bond. Throne of Lies. What do you think about Kendrick's new album? Can you see walk? I cannot see walk, but good album. And as a Drake stan, it pains me. But okay. My wife says we have not talked about the bald thing. Well, hopefully I don't go bald, but if I do, well, hopefully I don't lose my hair. If I do, then I'll just go bald. Jeremy Jaswinski, Jovan, what's the most you've spent on a pair of shoes? Probably 300. I don't like to, I really try to just get them dead stock, like retail price or dead stock. I like to get them retail, and I have used StockX, I have used Goat, but I really try to keep it. If it's like I can't get it through Nike or through one of the raffles or whatever, then I just kind of wait. But I also have like 5 different sneaker accounts on notifications, so there's been plenty of times I've just gotten the notification at the right time and I get it. Fang Charlie, Jovan, would you consider visiting China or Hong Kong during the off season? Yes, I would. I would. Jay, bro, why is everyone tearing their Achilles? Just do seated calf raises and call it a day. The crazy thing is like I have really, I did this in as humble of a way as possible, but my wife can confirm like I have good calves, and I'm a relatively slender, slim person, but like I would say my calves have been my best like muscular feature, and it sucked to have that go away, at least in one of them. Malcolm Taylor, Jovan, how tall are you? I say 6'5", 6'6". It depends on what if I'm wearing like Air Forces or Jordans or whatnot. But like without shoes, I'm 6'5". So I go with 6'5". Harry Chinani, do Lakers need a big win against OKC to advance? Yes, if LA loses to OKC, they are not advancing out of their group, and they will not be in the wild card. If they win, depends what happens. Phoenix plays San Antonio. If Phoenix wins the group. If the Lakers win and Phoenix loses, LA can win the group. Will depend on point differential. Although, well, Phoenix has the head-to-head, so then it's a little complicated. But LA could still get in as a wild card team, depending on point differential. But ideally, they probably need to beat OKC by like 20 plus to really have a shot, or to like lock it in. They still have a shot if they just win, but it's a little. I think losing to Phoenix, it wasn't just losing to Phoenix; it was like getting stomped because that killed their point differential. J Bay 05, Jovan, why'd you switch from Clippers writer to Lakers writer? Well, I mean, I was offered the position and I felt it was a promotion, and I think, I grew up liking both teams, but I was way more of a Lakers fan, and I think just being an Angelino and understanding what that meant, like it was a no-brainer. So that would be why I did that. Okay, I'm trying to. Jovan, you are 32 and look 18. You're in the wrong business. Make skincare IG and get rich. Pause though. I appreciate you adding the pause. Yeah, I guess I gotta do like a hair tutorial and a skincare tutorial. Dark Galaxy. So I'll address this. No, Jovan, you like the Clippers. So what I tell people is, and I don't know if maybe this is just a me thing where I grew up in the area that, where I grew up in Agora Hills, but for all my friends, we were all Laker fans, and the Clippers were our second favorite team because there was no rivalry. It was just like they were another LA team, and frankly, they had a very sad history, and it was like as long as the Clippers weren't playing the Lakers, we would root for the Clippers. And it was like, that's an LA team that there was no concept of like a rivalry or like whose town is it. It was very clearly a Lakers town. But then the Chris Paul trade, basketball reasons, that whole situation where he was going to be a Laker, then it gets nixed, then he ends up with the Clippers. That, in my opinion, was what started the Lakers-Clippers rivalry and the bad blood. And then all of a sudden the Clippers became good. And then they sort of were competing for, or they were trying to compete for a bit there. So from that point on, and at that point I was already covering the NBA, so I was no longer a fan. But I would say growing up, like they're like early to mid 2000s, like they did have 2005, 2006, where the Clippers had they nearly had the hallway series. But at least from when I was a kid and growing up, there was no concept of like a Lakers Clippers rivalry, because the Lakers were winning championships. They had superstars. The Clippers were bad and always like a team with lottery guys and like potential. So they were my second favorite team, but anytime they played the Lakers, I would root for the Lakers. Jeremy Jaswinski, Jovan, are the players specifically told they cannot bet on games? Yes, that is very clear. My mom says Jovan's good skin comes from his Puerto Rican side. I can confirm that. L.A. Jovan selected Darius Miles, Q Richardson, Corey McGetty. Yes, exactly. Tory Black, Jovan grew up in a Californian paradise where sports wars did not exist. Confirmed. I guess. I mean, I didn't have a football team, so I did have that whole situation. But Android Andres, Jovan is only 6 years younger than me and knows all the kid slang. LOL. Yeah, I try and stay up to date with what everyone's saying and doing. Mr. Messenger, Jovan, how has the team responded to JJ's blunt public honesty on the team? I think they did not respond well to Phoenix, so they responded well tonight. So we'll see how that continues to go. JBay05, Jovan, what's your secret? You look like a millennial, sir. Well, I am a millennial, but quickly I'll say, I mean, wash your face twice a day at least. Use skin cleanser. Make sure you moisturize. Eye cream and sleep, water. All those things are very important. Jeremy Jaswinski, Jovan, can we assume that black is your favorite color to wear? Yes, I basically only wear black t-shirts. For me, it's easy to. It's yeah. Like I don't like overthink. Like I have so many decisions I have to make in life already that I'd rather just have like basically a uniform, and I just pick like what I change my pants and I wear like I wear a jacket, a black t-shirt, change my pants, and then wear some type of Jordans, and that's like my uniform. Okay. We're at 133. I'll go to 135. Then I'm going to call it seriously this time. James says he hates the Clippers more than Boston. Look, I don't blame you. And I think now it is a rivalry. So I don't think there are many kids growing up in LA that like both. Jay, Einstein had all the same colored shirts in his closet too. You're good. You know what? That makes me feel better. Bino, can we do a live with JJ at a barbershop? I will run that by JJ. I know he said he doesn't really want to do podcasts anymore. But maybe off season. Rob Earth, Jovan, what is your prediction for a game against OKC on Friday? I think it's going to be competitive. I think it's going to be close. Gun to my head, I'd probably say a close OKC win, to be honest. I know some of you aren't going to like that, but I think that's progress compared to the blowout losses to Denver and Phoenix. But I think OKC, to me, they're the best team in the West. So I don't think there's any shame in losing to them. James brings up a good point. You got to wear sunscreen and sun lotion. So I have face lotion that has sunscreen in it, but you got to protect your skin from the sun. That's the quickest way to age, in my little research. Jeremy Jaswinski, are the Lakers aware of your growing stardom on YouTube? Well, I will say, well, thank you for saying that. I don't know if I'd quite agree yet, but I will take the compliment. So some people are, including one player who mentioned my intro, who will remain anonymous for now. Dylan Domino, Jovan, do you see Dalton saying the starting lineup? Yes. What about Vando? I think there's a chance when he comes back, he eventually starts again. Favorite non-Laker aside from Jokic? Probably Steph, I guess. Steph is awesome. I know. Lakers Warriors, I'm stepping into Lion Mans here, but Dark Galaxy, Jovan, are you cool with JJ? I hope so. I think so. I would say so, yes. EJ, worried about NBA ratings at all? Not sure why fans care. Combo doesn't entertain me, but some people love it. Yeah, I don't really care. Like I care in the sense of, obviously, if the NBA loses its relevancy, that affects the industry and affects fan interest and people paying for the product, and that has a ripple down effect. So certainly I want the league to be doing well and to be healthy, but I think people like to overreact and obsess about it. And now, certainly I think the NBA needs to make some changes. I think they need to get people to care more about the regular season. I think there's you could reduce the games. There's been some talk about the 3-point line. I think they tried to take it in that direction with the minimum games played for awards, but certainly, like, I'm not. I think there's stuff to be concerned about. I'm not going to say there's not, but I think a bigger issue has obviously been people cutting the cord and there just being more entertainment options in general. So that is a big factor to me, more so than anything wrong with the game necessarily. But there are things wrong with the game that I think they should try to address. Jay, ratings down because we're all watching on YouTube. Yeah, I mean, it's now sports and entertainment. Like, again, I just said I don't listen to a lot of music because I'm constant. Like, there's so many podcasts I want to listen to that I run out of time to listen to podcasts. And like, that is something that's in competition with music that, like, in theory you can do both. And there are a lot of people who do both, but for me, I'd rather just listen to podcasts and, like, consume information. So, like, people have so many options for entertainment and information and all this stuff. So that's why, to the right now 378 of you watching live, I appreciate you consuming and spending time with me. And, like, it's just where we're at right now is you have so many options, and you got to make sure it's what your fan base wants, and that's what I think the NBA could do a better job with. Also, Jovan, what if you were tasked to cover the Celtics? Well, I would have a say in that, but to some extent. But I mean, if you're just saying, like, I was thrown like $1 million and go cover the Celtics, I mean, I would do it for $1 million, but I it would not be my first choice. James says, you make us feel like we're all friends under the same guys, gals in the chat. Much love to Jovan and the rest of the chat. Appreciate that. That's exactly what I'm trying to do here. Throwing a lies. Do we finish the season in the top 4 teams or bottom 4 teams if you had to bet on it? If I had to bet on it, I'd pick top 4, but I mean, I don't feel good about either of these, but I would lean top 4. Okay. I keep pushing it back. Jay Hoodie's asking about Drake and the label. That's complicated. I think, look, I'm biased. I'm a Drake guy, but I think he's probably going to lose that battle. But I agree. Like, I think there's something to the greater good of fighting the label and sort of like the way that stuff can be controlled. But obviously, I think what sparked it is how big Not Like Us became and like the impact it had. So I don't think Drake is necessarily fighting them unless that happens. So it's a complex topic. We will end it on the, yeah. I'd have to change my light to a green light, but Jay says Jovan covers the Celtics. Helena better divorce his ass. So that's a good place. Actually, I think Charlie asked me all-time favorite Drake song. Mine would probably be God's Plan, LOL. I'll go with headlines. Marvin's Room or headlines. The Take Care is the best. But I'm going to call it there. Went about 35 minutes over of what I said, but that's what we do here on these post-game reactions. But I want to thank you all so much for watching and listening. I want to wish you all a happy Thanksgiving. Again, thankful for all of you tuning in and for supporting, super chats, comments, likes, sharing, all that stuff. So again, would not be able to do all this without you. And I'm really appreciative of you all. For those watching on YouTube, if you've made it this deep into tonight's show, I would appreciate if you considered subscribing, turning on channel notifications so you don't miss a future video, and liking and commenting on this video. And for those listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or your podcast platform of choice, please be sure to follow, download, and leave a 5-star review. I'll be back at a minimum Friday night, but I will try to be back Friday afternoon, either with a stream or a new episode of Buha's Block. Either way, I will talk to you on Friday. Thank you all again. Happy Thanksgiving. Stay safe. Enjoy your time with family and friends. And I will talk to you all on Friday.